students, welcome back to the channel that changes as much as Henry Pym changes identities. This is our review for Marvel's Spider-Man 2. Released as a console exclusive on the PlayStation 5, it was developed by Insomniac Games and it was published by Sony Interactive Entertainment. It is due to release at some point in the future on the PC, which we know thanks to Sony's database leak. Before we begin, I want to make it very clear that there will be no narrative or story spoilers. That is to say, we won't discuss character appearances, character plot twists, deaths, villain appearances, anything that might ruin the experience that hasn't already been revealed in a major trailer. We're going to be very careful in terms of what we talk about narratively, and we're going to be incredibly vague when we get to that section, but there will be no spoilers whatsoever. And as a final disclaimer, my relationship with Sony and Marvel has no effect on my views for Marvel's Spider-Man 2. I will prove this by being unbelievably critical and nitpicky. Thank you so much for watching. There is one studio that truly changed superhero gaming and revolutionized it, shooting the genre into the stratosphere of AAA gaming. That studio was Rocksteady, though. And the game was 2009's Batman Arkham Asylum, a beloved, incredible title that proved if you built a solid single-player campaign with love and passion for the property, the consumer would come, they would buy your product, they would spend loads of money on your franchise, and you would have success. It just took time, patience, and care. And that we all owe to Rocksteady and Arkham Asylum, a game that has been ripped off and homaged ad nauseum within the superhero genre and outside of it. Now, that being said, I don't believe it's worth any value to look at Spider-Man 2 in a vacuum. And that is to say, to look at it with the marketing perspective of this is the first of this, or this is the first of that, or the first time of anything, because it's just jargon that means absolutely nothing. The only kind of significant impact that Marvel Spider-Man will have on you is if the only Spider-Man you know is the Marvel Cinematic Universe's Iron Boy. By that standard, Marvel Spider-Man 2 is revolutionary in terms of its adaptation of the character. But, in my opinion, there have been superior adaptations prior. More to the point, there are 44 games featuring Spider-Man that I've played. Marvel Spider-Man in 2018 wasn't even the first open-world Spider-Man game. We owe that to 2004's Spider-Man 2, an adaptation of the film of the same name. And in my opinion, 2005's Ultimate Spider-Man is a wonderful exploration of Venom as a character, and I'll be as vague as possible on that. But we owe what Marvel Spider-Man 2 is to everything that came before. It's not new. It's not revolutionary. It doesn't do something incredibly new with Spider-Man. It doesn't make leaps and bounds. It is incredibly beautiful. It is photorealistic, and it looks amazing, and I assume these graphics are probably going to age unbelievably well, but that is a stylistic choice. Ultimate Spider-Man, released in 2005, and of course, taking a very comic book cel-shaded style and design, looks amazing even by today's standards. It is a comic book brought to life. That is subjective, and art and your enjoyment of art is absolutely subjective. But it is disingenuous to pretend like what Spider-Man 2 is doing hasn't been done before, whether in Spider-Man's own games or in games like Batman Arkham and the Arkham Trilogy. But that doesn't make Spider-Man 2 a bad game by any means. It's just a matter of acknowledging history. Now, the audience for Spider-Man, and specifically the audience for these two Spider-Man titles, the main 2018 title and of course now Spider-Man 2, skews significantly younger. It is impossible to get a hold of a lot of these older titles. Most of these older titles are simply lost in terms of average modern day gaming. They're not remastered. They're not easily replayable. And the way pop culture exists now and the way media and people consume now is so rapid that we often forget what was laid before us in terms of the foundation of how we got here. Spider-Man 2 takes an interesting approach with its narrative and story design. And this is a part that I'm going to be very quick on, and I'm going to get through as succinctly as possible because I can't really discuss the story. For the sake of this review and for the sake of anyone being able to check out this review, it is impossible to discuss this story in any meaningful way. I will say it is an average adaptation. For those of you who know me and for those of you who talked with me for years know that for me, like the pinnacle and the bar for Spider-Man is the Spectacular Spider-Man animated series. That is essential. That is Spider-Man. And in terms of comics, it really is Bendis and Bagley's first 100 some odd issues of Ultimate Spider-Man. Again, just an essential reading if you're a Spider-Man fan. Outside of that, if you're willing to look past the dated dialogue and the perhaps dated aesthetic in terms of art, the first 100 issues of Amazing Spider-Man are pretty much golden. I mean, in my opinion, they are absolutely worth reading. Now, for average modern audiences, they might not mean a whole lot, but it is worth looking at them and understanding that no, those first 100 issues of Amazing Spider-Man, those are golden. That's amazing storytelling, incredibly well done. So when you look at it and when you compare, and when you look at Spider-Man 2, that is why I say you can't really look at even the story. You can't look at anything in a vacuum because it doesn't exist alone. It absolutely does not exist alone. It is a reasonable adaptation of the symbiote story. It does things different from the comics, but there are still a lot we've seen, especially depending on how much Spider-Man media you've consumed. If you've kept up with Spider-Man in cartoons, a lot of this will ring familiar, and a lot of this will seem similar to you, but it isn't anything inherently new. Again, it's like going into Spider-Man 2. It's like when you went into Arkham Knight, if you played Arkham Knight, and the big thing about who is the Arkham Knight, it ultimately is very empty, and hinging the story on that is detrimental. I'll leave it at that. I do believe that the story could have benefited from a tighter focus in terms of the lead of the story, but I'll have to leave it again as vague as possible. I know that I have my ideas on what is a Spider-Man game, and I have my own perspective on what is essential Spider-Man mythos, what is the Spider-Man mythology that should be kept, and that's going to be different for everybody. You know, that's going to be where you're coming from, how much Spider-Man you consumed. Like I've said, though, if all you know about Spider-Man is the 2018 game and Marvel Cinematic Universe's Iron Boy, this will be revolutionary for you. This will 100% be. But it's hard to judge it like that for me, since I've played 44 games featuring Spider-Man. So it's a little different, which, again, goes into the gameplay. Now, for the sake of this review, I played with fall damage turned on and turned off. I actually think the fall damage being on is pretty fun. I don't really think it's harmful to the gameplay. I actually think it adds a layer to it. I thought it was entertaining. The world design is impeccable. Again, it is beautiful. By all means, it is bigger than Spider-Man 2 from 2004. It's bigger than Ultimate Spider-Man from 2005. The open world is beautiful, but it's repetitive. It falls into the same problem as a lot of open world games. There just isn't a lot of interesting things to do. And there's not a lot of surprises to be had. Again, being as careful as possible here. It doesn't do enough with its open world for me. Again, I feel like I've played this before. I feel like I've played it multiple times, and just in terms of development and in terms of how much you can do with Spider-Man and his lore and his world, I feel like there's a lot left on the table. I feel like there's a lot more that could have been done with this world, because pretty much it feels empty. There's only so much you can get from random crime activities. And I believe for me that wears off very quickly. There's not a whole lot of engagement from that to be had. And I feel the same way in terms of the enemies in the game and in terms of variety. I feel like I've seen it. I've seen it done better. I've played other Spider-Man games that have been more immersive. I've seen more interesting things done with Venom as well. And I think there is a lot to learn from looking to the past. And again, if anything, this is a review of Spider-Man as a whole, and that is to say, it's worth it to acknowledge that there have been good Spider-Man games before. You know, Batman had nowhere to go but up. There weren't good Batman games. Before Arkham Asylum, there were not good Batman games. So when Arkham Asylum came out and changed everything and actually led to a superhero renaissance in gaming, that was a touchstone that was a huge touchstone. And because of how consumers are and because of, instant gratification and rapid consumerism, games like that are quickly forgotten now. But I mean, that came out all the way back in 2009. That is a lifetime ago in terms of how we consume pop culture content now. But Spider-Man has had good games. Spider-Man's had really good games that deserve to be acknowledged and be reminded of, hey, if we're building a Spider-Man game, what was done before? What can we change? How can we improve it? And I think the gadgets are a leap in a certain direction. And again, this is going to be me being incredibly nitpicky, but it is kind of funny how someone is so incredibly broke and is building all of these incredible gadgets. That is kind of fun. Again, comic book immersion, that's fine. That does not affect my grade. It is simply an aside. Batman has his gadgets because he's a millionaire, billionaire, however, whatever they put him to in his retcons, however much money he has now. But Batman has those gadgets because he has the money. He's never portrayed as on the verge of homelessness, whereas Peter Parker is, and Peter Parker can't get his stuff together. And it is funny that he's rolling around with all of these incredible gadgets that if he started selling patents and stuff, it's funny. It is the only thing that could break immersion if you care about that stuff, but it is on the outside. And I think on average, I really don't believe the average consumer will give it a second thought. And coming off of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the average consumer might just think, oh, he got those from Iron Man. I wouldn't be surprised if some people thought that. I know of at least one that did due to my Twitter DMs, and I think that's interesting. And I don't know if the MCU's effect on the Spider-Man mythos is a positive or negative overall, because it's subjective. In my opinion, it's a negative, but it is an interesting little fact in terms of gathering information to adequately produce this review based on viewers, because I wouldn't be here without viewers and the original channel growth, and it wouldn't happen. It simply would not happen, which leads me into, again, one of the things that I was polling and asking people is about price, and how that affects buying. We're coming from, like I said, 44 Spider-Man games, and the average price of a game is now up. To get into Spider-Man 2, you have to provide $69.99 plus the price of a console, but if you don't have a PlayStation 5, so $400, $500, however much it is wherever you are in the world. But the base price for all of this has gone up. It is more expensive now. And is it doing enough new for that price? Is it doing enough revolutionary or evolutionary? And for me, in my opinion, it's really more of the same. You know, we had web attacks before. We've had all of this before, less pretty, sure, but in 44 games, we've seen Spider-Man do a whole lot, and we've seen Venom do a whole lot as well, even be playable. Even Venom having a center role in a number of games because he is a beloved and popular character. So the question becomes, in terms of what I asked and how it should be judged, is the price for entry into this versus being able to get online, find old copies of a game that are pretty cheap, play that and experience it. Yeah, if you want the latest and greatest, if you want, the photorealistic graphics, if you want the bigger open world, but that still doesn't offer anything more to do in it, then absolutely. But it's at the very least worth pointing out. Spider-Man 2 is more of the same. It's not a bad game. It's not a broken game. There's no bugs. It's solid. But it is a Spider-Man game. You've played this before. And maybe you only played it once before in 2018, or maybe you've played 44 Spider-Man games, over the years that we've experienced gaming. But the fact of the matter is, we've seen all of this done before. And if you bring Batman and his gadgets into it, we've really seen all of this done before. This is a perfectly average Spider-Man game. It does nothing wrong. It does nothing offensive, but it also doesn't take significant risks. We've seen Spider-Man games have multiple playable characters. We've had Spider-Man games where you switch and play as different characters. Even that is not new. Heck, Arkham Knight did that a little bit in terms of switching in certain fights between Batman and Catwoman. If you want to go back to Arkham City, there were segments where you play as Catwoman. All of this has been done before. And in my opinion, and especially in terms of as an archivist of old gaming titles, I think it's unfair to erase the past to prop up the present. And that is why Marvel Spider-Man 2 is a 3 out of 5. Thank you so much for watching. Stay safe, take care of others, and have a marvelous day. Bye, everyone.